Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
For this episode, we're joined by an award-winning editor and writer based in London. His short stories have appeared in various anthologies and magazines, and you may well remember him from his excellent story on this very podcast, written for the prompt Linen.
His most recent work as an editor, Heartwood and Mythago Wood Anthology, won a World Fantasy Award in 2025, and he's here with us today because the second collection of his own folk horror short stories, Come Sing for the Harrowing, is being reissued today from Clash Books.
We would like to welcome back Dan Coxon.
Hello, Dan.
Hello. Thanks for having me on again, guys.
Happy to.
And thank you. Thank you for listening, everyone. That was Dan. He's been showcased.
That's all I can do. That's it. That's like showcase the entire range of skills that I have. So
it was in your rider. We got 3 seconds of your audio. Did you have to buy a new trophy cabinet for that wonderful new award that you've won?
I tell you what, I didn't. It's literally just stuck behind my desk where I tend to stick things. But it is the nicest award that I've seen, to be honest. And it's hefty. Everybody who's seen a World Fantasy Award will tell you they're pretty heavy. You kind of feel like you could actually do someone an injury with them.
Yeah,
which is not true of a lot of awards.
A Chekhov's World Fantasy Award. Yeah, like it's definitely going to be involved in a murder at some point.
Well, it could be. I mean, it looks like it might already have been, to be honest.
Oh, crikey. So, that one's on the desk. Do you think you will get like a plinth or something? Or is it there to look at and be reminded?
I'm really, really terrible at even just celebrating. I celebrated for all of about half an hour, and that was it. I mean, it's partly because I'm so busy at the moment. This is going to be a recurring theme, I suspect, throughout this. But I am just so busy at the moment that I don't have time to stop and celebrate and do fun things because I'm always working on the next thing at the moment. I'm hoping next year's going to be quieter. A really quiet 2027. That's the plan.
Could be your victory lap, couldn't it? You could actually just relax and feel all the victories and amazing.
Maybe I'll just pretend I've retired. I'll put the word out that I've retired and no one's ever going to see me again.
We'll have to do the retirement episode next year, and then you're coming out of retirement episode the year after.
Exactly. I'll have my individual reunion tour, the one-man reunion tour in 2027.
If you announce that you're retiring, the problem there is that everyone's going to give you lifetime achievement awards, so you actually won't have any free time again.
I tell you what would actually happen is that people would start sending me projects and asking if I wanted to work with them on them, because that happens at the moment anyway. But I suspect it would happen even more if people felt I had free time. I would just get loads of emails saying, "I've had this idea. Do you want to work on it with me?" Because I've said yes to a few of those. I think the 3 books I've got coming this year basically came out of those conversations. So. I do like a good collaboration.
It's fantastic.
Sounds like it.
Well, I always feel like it means less work for me, but somehow it never does.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we found that when we had a go at co-writing, didn't we, Ben? That it sounds like you're going to be sharing the load, but what you're actually doing is doing a full load each and each other's load, and then go back over your own. And so
it essentially creates more work.
Mad. Yeah. Very impressed.
That's a lot of loads.
Well, that's what you get on this podcast, everyone. You get nothing but loads. Well, beyond the loads, what we're actually here for is to showcase your work, Dan. So would you like to tell us a bit about what you're going to read us first, or just...
Yeah, I'll give a little introduction because, I mean, it is a story I've read a couple of times before. So people who've kind of seen me at live events and things might recognize it. I kind of hope they would remember it. Quite often when I read it, I don't read all the way through to the end. So this time we are going to go all the way to the end. So even if people have seen me read it, I read it quite recently at the York Literature Festival. I didn't get to the end. So they should definitely keep listening and find out what happens in the end. But essentially, it is probably one of the more folk horror stories in encompassing for the Harrowing. Some of them are pretty kind of tangentially folk horror. Like, I would suggest a couple probably aren't even folk horror at all, although people have tried to convince me otherwise. But the general theme of the collection is to try and find new and interesting ways to approach folk horror rather than the kind of typical Wicker Man type story. And so this is one of those. It was trying to take folk horror and push it into a slightly weirder place and also a slightly more contemporary idiom, which sounds very fancy, but when you actually hear it, it's kind of obvious, I think.
Fantastic. When you're ready.
Oh, I should also say as well, actually, that it does feature me doing a really, really bad West Country accent. I've done this every single time that I've read it, and I can't get out of it now. And very bizarrely, there was a staged live reading of it by Liminal Tales in London about a month or two ago. And I wasn't able to make it, unfortunately, because I was ill. But I watched a recording of it afterwards, and the actress who was reading it did almost exactly the same accent. Which I find slightly creepy. So I've come to the conclusion that actually I haven't written a story. I have somehow just like channeled some kind of malevolent spirit who has spoken through all of us.
The realest folk horror of all.
Exactly. Which probably makes me sound worse because actually I did very little work. I just listened to this mad voice in my head. But yes, so apologies to any people actually in the West Country or from the West Country who are listening. I know it's awful. It's fine. That's just the way this malevolent spirit speaks, unfortunately. So I'll head into it. It's called Bumble Thatch, for reasons that will become clear as we move on. I saw Barnaby as we sat by the brook. We were dangling our toes in the water and trying to kick empty beer cans as they passed. He was standing at the gate to the top field, his arms crossed on top of the fence, chin resting on them as he stared in our direction. When I pointed him out to Shelley, she laughed in my face. "What are you talking about? The Bumble died back in March, didn't he? Your mam not tell you?" She was right. Ma had told me. I remembered now. She said he'd thrown himself from a bridge into oncoming traffic, pieces of him spread like mulch from junctions 8 to 9. He'd kept the road closed for 3 hours while they cleaned up. Still, I knew what I'd seen. We called Barnaby the Bumble Thatch on account of his mop of brown-black hair, always tangled and wild, and the way he stammered whenever us girls were around. Even his mam called him it one day outside school, which sent us into a day-long giggling fit. Still, I thought of him as Barnaby, when I thought of him at all. We'd grown up together, and when he wasn't facing a crowd, he was sweet and funny. He'd bought the Fine Young Cannibals tape for my 14th, which was more than most of my friends. Shelley said he fancied me. I told her she was as blind as she was ugly. What I never said was that I kind of fancied him too. They'd have hung me from the school flagpole if I had. I forgot about seeing Barnaby in the top field for 2 days. Then, on Sunday, I saw him again. He was further into the field this time, sitting among the straw stubble. He lifted his hand and waved. Ma and her cronies were 10 paces ahead, so it was easy enough to slip through the gap in the hawthorn. The straw scratched at my shins as I walked up the slope, and I remembered I was wearing my best dress for church. We believed in tradition round here. Ma still frowned on technology, and heathenism, and the modern ways of those up in town. When I reached Barnaby, I didn't sit down. "Hello," he said. "Hello back at you," I said. "What you doing here sitting in Pop Denya's field?" He shrugged, pulled a stray length of straw from the dirt and stuck it between his lips. "Just waiting for you," he said after a few moments. "I knew you'd be along sooner or later." "What I mean is," I said, "we all heard you were dead. They held a special service for you. Said you were off your head on booze and drugs. Threw yourself in front of a truck. We all thought you were gone." "Nah," he said, smiling that crooked smile. "I was stone cold sober when I did it. Just didn't see much point in it all. Didn't want to go on." I thought about that. There was no denying that he was sat in front of me, his hair all messed up in that way of his. Through a tear in his pants, I could see a smear of mud across his knee. "Why'd you come back then?" I asked, putting on my sassiest voice. "If it's all so bad here, what you doing planting your arse in our field?" He smiled. For you, Iris Penny. I came back for you. When we were little, Barnaby's family lived 2 doors along from mine. We played together in the sandy hollow down the side of Willowshade Farm, or sometimes in the brook when the water was low. He was the first friend I had. It's funny what comes back to you. I remember sitting on the bank, throwing stones at the fish knifing through the shallows, poking a dead squirrel with sticks till its stomach burst, making corn dollies with my ma from the stray hens at harvest. Barnaby didn't speak for almost 5 years. It got to the point where his mam and pop were worried, talking about sending him to a special doctor in town. Then one autumn day, when we were splashing in puddles, he placed a cold hand on my arm and stared like he was seeing me for the first time. Mine, he said. I didn't tell a soul about meeting Barnaby in the field. You'll think I'm a liar, but that's the truth of it. Speaking with Bumblethatch wasn't something you admitted to, not if you wanted any respect in the community. Even the grown-ups knew he was tainted. I turned it over in my head, though, and after dinner I asked Ma what she'd heard about his passing. Young Master Barnaby? She asked, as if I'd said a dirty word. It was sad, all right, what happened to him. Threw himself off that bridge, he did, but you know all this, lass. You were there at the service. What's brought all that up again? I'd rehearsed my next question as I'd walked back from the top field. Might he have survived it after all? Ma snorted like a horse. Survived it? They had to scrape him off the road, what I heard. There wasn't enough to put in a coffin, so they burned him at the crematorium in town. He's nothing but smoke and ashes now, girl. We probably breathed him in if the wind was blowing the wrong way. That boy's as dead as your late father, and there's no coming back from that. I found Barnaby at the crest of the hill the next morning, leaning against the old oak. Hello again, he said, the straw, or another like it, still suspended from the corner of his mouth. Enough of your nonsense. I thrust my hands against my hips, a stance I'd learnt from Ma, my chin jutting toward him, like judge and jury. I've spoken to folks, and there's no doubt about it. You died 2 months gone by. Dived head first into traffic, they said. So what are you doing hanging round here, Barnaby? You looking to haunt me? Put the frights up me? 'Cause I'm not scared of you, if that's what you're thinking. And should you ask me, I'd say that's a pretty bad use of a haunting. He smiled then, and I had no doubt it was him. I've known that smile since I was a baby. It was one of the reasons I could never turn on him like the others. I've come back to see you, Iris, he said, still smiling, but not to haunt you. I want your help with something, and you're the only one who can do it. Will you help me? Well, I'm no fool. I knew just the sorts of curses he might put on me if I said no. So I nodded, and he nodded back, like that sealed it. Good, he said. I want you to kill your friends. It made sense when he told it to me, sitting there under the sprawl of the oak. They'd hounded him since he was a toddler, made his life a misery. Threw stones at him when I wasn't about, spat in his hair. Once they pinned him down and put dog shit up his shirt. These people who I called my friends were friends to no one, he explained. They were vile bullies, cut from the very worst cloth. Me and him, we could put that right. We could make the world safe for other people. I saw that as he said it. I think I already knew. You don't always get to choose who your friends are, not in a village as small as ours. You get what you're given, and you either survive them or you don't. I'd bought my own survival when I threw my lot in with Shelley, but the cost was my friendship with Barnaby. Silently, I'd always hated her for that. Gavin and Arnie, too. Barnaby spelled out the misery they'd caused him, the madness that had made him take his own life. I might have shed a tear or two. Do you know what this is? He said. Reaching up, he pulled down a branch so I could see the round swelling, like a ball on its bark. Course I do, I said. Oak apple days 3 months gone, though. What are you wanting with it now? They're wasps that build them, he told me, as if I hadn't just said that I knew. They plant their young inside a bud, and the bud changes into this, a home for their babies. When the time is right, the wasps will hatch from a hole in the side, having lived off the oak all that time. You can be my oak apple, he said, reaching his arm around my waist. "You'll feed me, won't you, Iris?" I felt a scratch on my belly then, and pulled away. Lifting up my shirt, there was nothing to see, but still it stung, like he'd drawn a cracked fingernail across the skin. "When do we begin?" I asked. When you live this close to the land, you learn to use what's around you. The drooping blue flowers of monkshood, poison hemlock, hidden among the creamy blooms of cow parsley. There's death aplenty in the fields. Disguising the taste was the hard part. No one eats poison when it's bitter and vile. You have to dress it up, sweeten the brew. You have to make them want to eat it, so it fills them up. Everyone likes a brownie. Shelley had baked some funny brownies for her party last year, and we'd gorged on them until our tummies were full and our heads were in the clouds. Sickly sweet and impossible to resist. "What are we celebrating?" Gavin asked as I handed them round. "You prickers or something?" He pointed at my belly, and you could see it there, just the swelling. A bump beneath the fabric like a giant gall. "Don't be daft," Shelley said, taking two, one in each fist. "She's just been eating these all week, hasn't she? Unless one of you boys has gone near our Iris without me knowing." Sniggers all round, knowing glances. Well, I wouldn't touch you either, I thought. Don't need to. Barnaby looks out for me now. Shelley was the first to fall sick. She had 5 brownies, I think, maybe 6, although the poison may not have been spread equally through them. Breathing problems, excruciating pain, vomiting, diarrhea. By the time an ambulance made it out to us, she was already pale as a corpse. She couldn't even speak as they loaded her onto a stretcher, curled up like a baby rat as her innards struggled to break free of her body. She was dead before they got to the hospital. They had to turn back to pick up Gavin and Arnie, squeezing them in alongside her still warm body. When it was clear what was happening, they sent another 2 ambulances from county, but they took 2 hours to reach us. By then, it was all over. None of them made it to the hospital ward. They thought I was hysterical, but inside I was laughing. I could see Barnaby waving from the hilltop. I dropped the last few brownies into the brook. Ma noticed the swelling a few days later. The police wanted to talk with me, to ask where the brownies had come from, but she held them off for a day. They never liked coming to our village if they could help it. When 2 of them turned up at our door, she pointed to the dome blooming beneath my t-shirt and said, "A girl in her condition, you must be having a laugh. Away with you. We've got trouble enough without you helping, thank you very much." I watched them limping back up the path to their car, tails between their legs. "Now," Ma said, once they'd driven away and she'd made us both a brew. "What are we going to do with you, girl? I always said those boys were trouble, but you wouldn't listen. I don't want to know who the father is, but we've got some decisions to make." "I want to keep it," I said without thinking. "It's mine." Ma just shook her head and tutted. Didn't look at me as she sipped her tea. Some nights I'd sit up in bed, when the moon was heavy enough to send light through my window. You could see it easy now, the bump. I ran my hand over it. The skin was rough in places, like willow bark. I'd stolen some butter that I rubbed into it with my fingertips. They traced the line where Barnaby's fingernail had scratched me, invisible but still tender to touch. I remembered that cold hand on my skin, back when we'd played as children. I placed my hand on it, hoping to feel something move inside. But I felt nothing but hollowness, the rise and fall of my breath, an unnamed ache that was something like hunger. A few times I thought I spotted Barnaby again, stood among the trees. But it was never him. Only a shadow, or a funny-shaped elm, its branches cracked and twisted like it was waving. Once I saw him in the clouds, drifting above us like an untethered god. The swelling in my belly grew and grew, until finally I climbed Popdenia's field again to find him. The straw stubble was rotten and slimy underfoot as I walked. Of Barnaby there was no sign, just the chatter of crows as they picked over the dirt. My breath was short, and I had to stop a couple of times, but eventually I reached our oak. I had a pain in my side like a stitch. Slumping to the ground, I looked up through the branches. He'd left me a gift there, tied where he'd found the oak apple. 2 rough corn dollies, twisting and dancing in the breeze. A boy and a girl. "Oh, Barnaby," I said. "Oh, Bumblethatch, what have you done to me?" And as I felt the wetness gush between my legs, I heard a buzzing like 1,000 wasps, hankering for the world.
Good Lord, that was phenomenal.
I'd like to congratulate you on your accuracy, sir, because that contained both folk and horror.
It's definitely a weird one.
You don't say.
Also, you
That
were
was
saying before about
wicked.
like being possessed by a voice. As I was listening to that, it felt like it had always existed. It
It's
felt like
very
a story.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find there's points where I'm reading like the narration bits in between where I almost have to stop myself lapsing into it as well. It's kind of like it wants to be spoken in that voice. It's really odd.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, what a story! But like, actually, like the core tale, like beyond the this kind of like odd voice that keeps coming for you. No, really interesting tale. I really liked the characterization of Iris Penny. I felt like she had a shade of do you know Tiffany Aching, the Pratchett?
Yes,
YA.
I do. Yeah.
She's quite this kind of precocious, strong-willed girl that doesn't walk the sort of well-trodden path. And there was a degree of I felt like there was a degree of that kind of characterization to Iris Penny. Admittedly, way darker. But I connected really well with it for that reason. Bumblethatch is just a great word as well.
Yeah, that came first. So interestingly, both that came first as the title, and also the collection itself. The title of that story, "Come Sing for the Harrowing," that came first as a title as well. In both cases, I was trying to think of like a folk horror-y type title, and then almost wrote a story to fit that title.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's incredibly strong. There was also like a degree of almost like a Stig of the Dump angle to it as well. I think like this kind of
That's interesting. You're not the first
Yeah.
person to say that. Someone else said that to me as well.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not entirely surprised about. I mean, I absolutely loved Stick of the Dump when I was a kid.
Yeah.
To the extent I bought a copy of it for my kids that they've adamantly refused to read,
Oh, no.
and is still sitting in pristine condition on a shelf somewhere in our house.
No,
But yeah, when I was a kid, I must have read it several times. I think certainly I
liked
have
that
a
book a
really
lot.
strong memory of it.
I remember it does get very strange, doesn't it, at points, Stig of the Dump? There's the whole thing
Yes.
with the escaped wild cat.
Yes, there is, isn't it? I'd forgotten that,
Yeah.
but yes.
They're I think they're at a Halloween party or something, so Stig can come because no one questions the existence of a small caveman. And then it's like a lynx or something. I half remember this, and I'm now on a tangent, so I must apologise. But
Well, I do feel as well, going back to that era, someone else mentioned that they felt there was a bit of Wurzel Gummidge in there. And I was like, again, I kind of watched that quite a lot and quite obsessively for a while when I was a kid. So that also wouldn't surprise me if that was also true. I think there is a certain type of kind of slightly kind of, not necessarily West Country, but certainly kind of very rural England, kind of farmyard folk horror, shall we say?
Yeah.
That both of those things kind of draw upon. That again is different, I think, to the kind of Wicker Man type, outsider comes to rural community type horror.
Yes, definitely. This comes from inside the community, doesn't it?
Yes.
She's fully entrenched. I really enjoyed the line about her she put her hands on her hips, a trick that she learned from her ma. I thought that was really good. There was another one that I really enjoyed. It was curled up like a baby rat was one of the things that really fucked me up in that story.
Yeah, there's that whole sentence. Every time I read it, I enjoy that sentence. That's the one point where it suddenly goes like really, really dark. It's almost like a little switch flips, and then suddenly it's a bit dark up until then, but then Because there's a line, I forget it now, and I've put the story to one side, but it's a line about she's curled up like a baby rat, and like her innards are trying to break out of her or something,
Break
isn't it?
out. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
Yes, curled up like a baby rat as her innards struggled to break free of her body. I kind of felt like that's one of the few points where I kind of allow it to go like full on gross horror-y thing. Because a lot of what I do is intentionally quite subtle and low key.
Yeah.
If people are expecting kind of big kind of body horror and disgusting in your face horror, you're not going to get that here most of the time. That's one of the few times when I kind of allowed it to seep through for very briefly, I thought.
How carefully do you create the feeling of it being not okay that this happens to these youngsters, but sort of that it's okay. Because obviously they are set up. They've bullied someone to death. They bullied someone to suicide.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just wondering, like when you are actually creating a story like that, how much you're consciously thinking about, I need to swing the needle a little bit towards people being okay with this horrible shit happening.
I think it kind of depends on the story you're telling and where you're coming from in it, to be honest. I mean, I'm a big fan of revenge stories and ghost stories in general, and especially like that kind of like somebody who's been wronged and comes back in the afterlife to wreak their revenge on the people who did them wrong. I mean, I'm always an absolute sucker for that, and it goes all the way back through kind of ghost story history. But I do think there are different ways to approach it, and it just creates a different style of story. Because you could do it the other way. You could have someone who feels that they've been completely wronged, but actually the people involved have done something very minor and are punished way beyond what they deserve, which is fine, and that creates a different effect. But then you would very much feel you are on the side of the people rather than on the side of the ghost, if that makes sense. So I think in this particular story, for it to work, I felt you had to side with Iris, and in order to side with Iris, you have to side with Barnaby to some extent, or at least see why she's siding with him. Otherwise, it doesn't really make much sense if she agrees to go along with him if he was just a weirdo who everybody just left alone and was quite nice to.
I think the reason I asked the question is just because it felt effortless. Or at least you made it sound effortless in the construction of it, and I realised that it just happened, and I hadn't really noticed it happening. It's just very, very strong. You mentioned about the sort of tradition of revenging in ghost stories. I always remember I studied a play on my degree called The Revenger's Tragedy. It's a Jacobean play by Tom Middleton, and it's basically about this kind of thing where somebody comes back for revenge and they fucking kill everybody. And they were really big in not Elizabethan theatre but like Jacobean theatre.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether there was any crossover between something like the ghost sort of horror genre writing and things like more kind of like literary sources, like playwrights of the 16th.
Well, I mean, I think there definitely is. I mean, even if you just look at Shakespeare being the obvious one, there's a lot of ghosts and a lot of horror. I mean, again, our eldest has just been studying Macbeth, so it's the one that springs most immediately to mind. But I mean, it's in many ways a horror story. I mean, I'm not the first person to say it. I've seen other horror writers say it, that kind of when they were at school and they were kind of being forced to study all these kind of high works of literature, and they kind of felt like their love of Stephen King or whoever was in some way kind of dirty and lesser than all these great literary works. Then you come across things like Macbeth and you kind of go, well, actually, that's kind of cool. That's the kind of thing I like.
Do you have a take on why that evolved at all? Because I'm very aware of this. like I enjoy genre reading a lot, like science fiction and fantasy and things like that. And but I'm also I have also read a lot of the classics, and I studied literature, and I've never really understood. And I encountered it on my degree, like this kind of elitism / sort of just sort of like partitioning it off as though it's completely separate. I was just
I mean, weirdly,
as somebody that's edited a lot. Like, what's your take on that?
Weirdly, I think it's happening less and less. I think we're gradually starting to move beyond it a bit. In that, if you look now, we were discussing this the other day when I was at there was a folk horror festival in York for a couple of days, and we discussed it there in the pub. And we were kind of saying that there's books that are coming out now that are being published as kind of quite mainstream literary books, that actually in another era probably would have been published as horror, and absolutely are 100% horror. The first one that sprung to mind, and it's the first that springs to mind again, is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. Very much to look at it, you would think it was a new piece of literary fiction from a mainstream publisher. Absolutely through and through a horror novel. Like I said, in any other era, that would absolutely have been marketed as a horror novel. I think now what they've discovered is partly through film, but quite largely, I think, through TV, that actually these things are big markets. People love them. People loved Game of Thrones. They loved The Walking Dead. Genre is by far and away bigger and more interesting in television than most of what you would consider to be kind of literary source material. So things about relationships or family histories or whatever. And I think the publishing industry has finally woken up to the fact that they were kind of missing a trick by pushing them to one side into this little niche area in a bookshop, when actually they were something that probably loads of people would love if you could just convince them to pick it up. So I do think that's partly it. I mean, I do think as well, there's always, within every genre, there's always like the hardcore genre stuff that you have to be a bit of a hardcore fan in order to really love. And you definitely get that in horror. There's some horror which I think if you gave it to an average reader, they would go, "What the hell is this?" But I think you get it in fantasy and sci-fi and stuff as well, and to some extent even in crime as well. Because I've been doing a lot of crime reading lately because I've been judging the Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger for the last 2 years, and even in crime, I think there are ones that are definitely kind of hardcore crime books that maybe a general reader might struggle to get into a bit. But those who know the history of the genre and the formats of it and stuff, that they can see that it's kind of doing something interesting and gnarly and kind of weird and unusual, and probably like it for that. But without that context, you probably wouldn't get it. We went hugely off topic there, but these things go, isn't it?
I'd read that essay, man. I would read that essay. You mentioned Fine Young Cannibals at one point. Is that just like your personal music tastes, or was it? Were you?
It's a weird one. So it was a cassette that I had. I did have Fine Young Cannibals album on cassette when I was that age. I've literally. Somebody asked me why I'd kind of appeared to have set this kind of like in the 90s probably. So not quite completely contemporary. Nobody seems to have mobile phones. Fine Young Cannibals seems to be like vaguely contemporary. And I'm not entirely sure why. It just felt right that it did. I think it was partly giving it a bit of distance in time. So I think making it actually like completely 100% present day, I think throws in things like internet and mobile phones and stuff, which I think would have messed with everything. But I wanted to set it still relatively contemporary, so not like 60s or 70s, or maybe not even 80s. So I think 90s felt about right. I also just like the fact they had the word cannibals in. I thought for a horror story, I was trying to think of what I could put in. I was like, well, I could put like a really kind of like goth band or something. I was like, no, let's go Finding Cannibals, because it's got a hint of it in Cannibals, but also it's the kind of thing that a 14-year-old girl would be happy to receive, whereas Fields the Nephilim probably less so.
So to drag it slightly back towards the story, it has a very similar feel, and please take this as the compliment it's intended as, to something like Slender Man, which is a very popular sort of take on the genre now.
Yeah,
this sort of internet birthed folk horror, but far more elegantly told than the teenagers find a bit of paper in the woods.
I mean, I was intentionally trying to write quite a short story with this one as well. I don't always. I tend to kind of my stories have got longer and longer the longer I've been doing this. So I average out around about 5,000 or 6,000. I was intentionally writing something quite a lot shorter than that. So things needed to kind of chop along quite quickly, which I think gives it quite a contemporary feel, and almost like a kind of oral storytelling feel. We don't see too much kind of interior dialogue and things. Things move along in terms of action relatively quickly. I have this thing anyway
doesn't it?
I have this thing anyway that I think comes from being an editor, that I'm always trying to think, well, where will an average reader be expecting this to go, and how can I send it somewhere different instead? So I think a lot of what happens, certainly towards the end, kind of came out of that. It was like, okay, I can see where this story is heading, but then so can everyone else can also see where this story is heading. So what else can I do with it that would make it slightly more interesting? So I think
Yeah.
that's why we end up with all the kind of weird oak apple stuff and all that kind of thing.
The Oak Apple stuff was deeply unsettling. As soon as she started getting the bump, and because of the way that you were describing the horror and the physical sort of sensations of things, I had a really strong sense at that point of foreboding, but like a delightful. Oh, this is going to be horrible. This idea that you were going to have to describe what would happen when she birthed loads of wasps,
Yeah.
and you did not disappoint. The wetness gush between her legs and all that. Oh, amazing! Go on, Nico. I think I stepped on you. What were you saying?
That's all right. I was actually going to ask. So I don't imagine that you've birthed a huge swarm of wasps at any point. But are there any sort of strange events from your own life that you've woven into your folk tales?
Um, Probably not so much, but I do feel these things always inevitably bring themselves in. So, as a prime example, probably I do have a massive scar on my stomach from where I had appendicitis that turned into peritonitis, which is where it becomes infected and then explodes. Like when I was about 5 years old, and apparently I only heard this relatively recently. That apparently when I went in for surgery, the surgeons did say to my parents at the time that it was about 50-50 whether I would survive or not.
Jesus.
But the scar is still quite enormous. It's like a good sort of 6-7 inch scar.
It grew with you.
So I mean, I guess that's in there with the scratch on her belly. But I mean, you don't think about these things at the time, but I guess you draw on your own experience all the time, don't you? So it's almost inevitable, really. We had a little corn dolly that my kids made that was hung up in the living room for about 2 years as well. So I suspect the corn dollies at the end probably came from there.
So you say drawing on your own experiences there, but do you draw on your own fears as well? Like obviously some people are quite scared of wasps. Is it wasps because you don't like them, or do you just reach for things you know would freak people out?
Do you know what? I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, I don't know where the wasps one came. I'm not actually that bothered by wasps. I would be more bothered by the kind of body horror aspect of it. The idea of something unnatural going inside you. I find quite icky.
Yeah, that's
Not
fair.
comfortable with that at all. Um, but um, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Otherwise, like I said, with wasps, I don't particularly have a problem with. I don't particularly like wasps, but I don't have an issue. It's my job to get them out of the house, so I have to be able to go with it.
You're inured to
Um,
them.
exactly, they're fine as long as they stay outside. I don't like really massive hornets. I will say that. We've started getting really big hornets in the last year or two where I live, and apparently they're more docile than wasps and less aggressive. And I mean, if they sting you, they do a lot of damage, but they're not likely to. They just run away. But they look really fucking massive and scary. I would not mess with a big hornet.
There's a degree of like sounding like a bomber as well, right? Like they are just
Oh yeah.
they are displacing a lot of air as they move.
They're loud and they just look like a wasp, but just like
Big.
either really, really close or just like a wasp that ate all the other wasps.
How far away is that wasp?
I know. It does. It just looks like a weird perspective trick.
Alexa, set reminder, impregnate Dan with loads of hornets. Apologies to anyone listening out loud whose Alexa I just set off.
I had a few more bits about the story. Actually, I'd just like to quiz you on maybe. His first word being mine.
Yes.
As he touches her, deeply unsettling. Again in that voice as well. But I really enjoyed the way that it recurred when she says that she wants to keep the baby.
Yes. Yeah.
And it did feel like there was some sort of other thing, beyond reality that was actually affecting and like being passed from person to person.
And the interesting thing is, that's one of those things that I kind of recognized and saw myself once it was written, but I've no idea where that came from. That was like it was either my subconscious or just very, very good luck. But yeah, I didn't notice it until it was written, and I started reading through it and working on it. But actually, you do kind of have that echoing. But yeah, I don't know where that came from at all. Just the voice.
Yeah, we spoke to Julian McKenna not that long ago.
Yeah.
And she mentioned that things like themes should emerge organically rather than you sort of like bringing them with you into the work. And I think there is something to that. Like, obviously, because if you're just constantly in your head and not allowing anything to flow, then it won't actually happen. It will feel stilted on the page, won't it? But when you come to edit something that somebody else has written, like, how careful are you to sort of be aware of the stuff that they almost didn't know themselves that they'd done? And
Yeah, I mean, I always say when it comes to talking about editing that like the editor's job is to bring out the best in what's there. So we're always there to not add anything or change anything other than what needs to be tweaked in order to bring out what the author's trying to do. So, but I do think sometimes the author doesn't always realize what their subconscious is trying to do.
yeah,
Because there have been times when I've gone back to people, but much like this, when and I've kind of said, oh well, clearly you're trying to deal with this theme because it occurs here, here, and here, and I wonder if we can make it a bit clearer or whatever, and they've kind of gone, oh, was I so I didn't notice that, and I was like, well, like, as a reader, it's kind of there, so I think on some level it's obviously going through your mind. But I do think the editor's job, at least when you're editing like other people's work for a living, I think a lighter hand is always best. And I think it's very much the case that you're trying to bring out just the very best in what they're already trying to do. So you've got to be careful not to try and change what they're trying to do, but just to help them bring it out in the best and clearest way possible. And I think the same also, interestingly, is true as like an anthology editor. You're still trying to work with the individual authors, but then also present the stories next to each other so they all kind of work as well as they possibly can next to each other, but not trying to kind of twist things to fit into the way you want them to be, but just allow them to be, the author's own voice.
Oh, that sounds like such a fun puzzle. Did you edit this one yourself? Did somebody else work on this with you?
Yes, no, I do all the editing myself in the first instance. There were some very light edits from the publisher, but they were actually very light in this instance. But yeah, I do a lot of editing on things myself. I mean, there's things like, for example, in this one, which is a good example of the way I tend to work, is the oak apple thing didn't really come through until the last kind of page or so on the first draft. So then I went back and I edited in all the earlier stuff about the oak apple. And kind of integrated it into the story so that by the time we got to that ending, it then kind of made some sort of narrative sense, at least in part. I don't think it makes full narrative sense. But yeah, that's it's kind of sowing those breadcrumbs backwards, so it kind of gives it some kind of coherence.
Do you ever have a moment where you realise that you're stupid? Because it just clicked for me that his name was Bumble like a bee, and then he became a big wasp pregnancy. Oh
Yeah,
God,
it's a weird one but again that was never intentional. That came out like accidentally in the writing, and then I was like, oh yeah, of course that is. So again, that was kind of something I leaned on a bit heavier in the edits and stuff. I seem to remember on this one as well, I think I edited it back quite heavily, which again I think affects the pacing. I think that's one of the reasons this one has that kind of slightly faster pacing. It's one of the reasons I like to read it out loud. There are three reasons. One is that the pacing is fairly fast and things actually happen. It's not just somebody sitting and ruminating. One is that I get to do a silly accent, and one is that it has elements of humor in it as well, which not everything I do does, but I think for readings, it's always much better to have a story that has something to lighten the mood a little bit, so it's not just unrelenting.
Yeah, I can see that. I had a question about another line. There was one that was, unless I misheard it, I think it was, "We believed in tradition round here."
Let me think. It might have been. Well, was that the one with them? Let me find it. That's near the beginning, isn't it?
It's quite early, yeah.
I remember what it was. Yes, we believed in tradition around here.
So that's past tense, believed.
It is, yes.
Because that really stuck out for me in an interesting way.
Yeah, I think my intention there was that, again, it's that sense of things not having changed. Is that, we've always believed in tradition around here kind of thought. At least that's the way it came out, I think.
Rather than being told, like her much older being like, okay, we lost that because of this story, which is how I first interpreted that. Which I both work. It's just there was something really quite like that. It filled me with dread. The idea that like basically
that works for me.
Whatever's going to happen in the story changed people's opinions about the things that they should hold on to about the past and tradition.
Yeah, and there is a sense here that her mother kind of like rejects kind of religion and authority and things, but but very much has her own traditions and things that they believe in. But yeah, Iris and Bumblethatch are kind of a new thing. It's kind of I think I wanted there to be a sense of them being kind of a new, younger generation, much like I'm trying to do something different with the folk horror. It's kind of like almost like her mother is old folk horror, but her and Barnaby kind of are the new folk horror with the new generation, I guess.
I have one final thing to say about the story. The line, "There's death aplenty in the fields," I think is actually beautiful. I really enjoyed that line.
Thank you.
And just everything else that was going on around it. But I felt like that was the gem in the crown of that section. The whole poisoning section. I felt like that was the real gem line for me.
I seem to remember. So I think when I first wrote it, I struggled a little bit with that bit in that I felt it was too short. At least in the original version, it was too perfunctory. It did all this build up, and then suddenly it was like, "Hey, let's poison everyone," and then everyone got poisoned. So there's the way it's actually set out in the story. There are quite a lot of breaks in the story, and that's almost like a separate section in and of itself, which I think, if memory serves me correctly, I wrote separately and kind of injected back into the narrative just to slow things down a little bit there. It's almost like a little cutaway about the poison in the fields and that kind of stuff before it cuts back to her poisoning everyone, just to slow things down a bit. Otherwise, it will just rushed a bit towards the end, if that makes sense.
I really liked the moment during the poisoning where there was a rare moment of her own introspection, explaining about how the police thought she was sort of in hysterics through sadness, but she was laughing.
Just laughing, yeah.
And it's so unbelievably dark.
I kind of quite like the fact still as well. Not that I'm supposed to like my own stories, but I quite like the fact that her mum just sends the police away. The police are scared. The police are scared of her mum. She basically just tells them to bugger off. So they do.
I grew up for a time in Cumbria, and they would call people like that offcomers. People that were like not from the local area, and they just wouldn't matter what was going on, they'd see them off. It was quite a it felt like a real slice of life, like that I could relate to. So the anthology, what caused it to be reissued? What's the process behind that?
I mean, there was a very long story around this. So basically, it originally came out in, where are we now? So it must have been 2024. It came out sort of October time. And the publisher was a publisher called Weird Little Worlds, which is again an American publisher. And they seemed very on board when they signed it up. In actual fact, I had a couple of stories selected for anthologies by them, and they said to me, "Do you have enough to actually make a collection?" And I was like, "No, but give me a few months and I'll see what I can do." So I kind of worked on stuff to actually fit into it and make it all hold together. And then when it came to it, they were very quiet for a while. And it came to release day, and pretty much at that point, they told me that they were closing their doors, effective almost immediately. So it basically was in print for about 6 weeks. It was like 5 or 6 weeks it remained in print. A few copies knocked around on Amazon for about a month longer than that, but that was it. Pretty much the only people who actually got a copy of the original one were people that I met in person and sold a copy to. That was it. Essentially, it reached about 20 people, I think.
I have to ask how that was psychologically.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, you hear horror stories within the genre. They actually were very nice about it, and they were very good. They reverted everything back to me. They gave me all the files. They even actually have an audio book of it that they'd had recorded, which they gave me all the files for. So I'm sitting on an audio book of it as well if we ever need it. But, they were really good about it and very apologetic. So, it was absolutely gutting, obviously. Yeah. But at the same time, I was like, this could be so much worse. I've heard horror stories before. This is not by any means the worst thing that's happened to anybody. But yeah, really gutting. And especially because I'd put a lot behind it. I was really excited by it. It seemed to be really good. It got some really good people involved with it. It was blurbed by like Eric LaRocca, who I absolutely love. It had Brian Evanson write the introduction to it, who I absolutely love. So I was really like, this is going places, and then it just went absolutely nowhere and disappeared almost without a trace. It was actually Eric LaRocca who basically all the people who'd blurbed it or kind of helped with it, I kind of got in touch with them and explained the situation. And so I said, it's now not going to be available. If anyone has any particular leads or advice, please speak up, because I'd love to get it somewhere else. And Eric was originally published in the US by Clash Books, and he said to me, do you want me to make an introduction to Christoph at Clash? And I was like, yeah, because I knew they had a great reputation. I knew they did really good things with Eric's books. And it just went from there. I mean, Christoph looked at it relatively quickly, as things go in the publishing industry. And he liked it as well. And yeah, before we knew it, it was going to be re-released by them. And it's just gone from strength to strength. They've given it a beautiful cover this time around as well, which, I mean, the first cover was nice for the original book. This one is like so much nicer. Really, really happy with the cover. So yeah, that's kind of the story.
The sort of the woodcut with the angular face. Yes. No, I've seen that. Yes, it's very pretty.
Yeah, and it's one of those covers that it reproduces well on Instagram and things like that. So it's really working in favour of it. So people who have never heard of me are suddenly like sharing pictures of it on Insta and things. And I'm like, well, that's good.
That's great. Oh, fantastic. I'm so happy for you. That's lovely.
But it just goes to show that sometimes, what seemed to be a terrible situation probably was a blessing in disguise. I think it's bigger now in this reissue from Clash than it ever would have been with the original publisher. So, sometimes these things do work out. You just need to kind of keep moving forwards, I think.
Phenomenal. So we should just take a moment here, I think, to say that, as we mentioned at the start, Come Sing for the Harrowing is out today. And it probably is available for pre-order before this point, but it's out now. So you can order your copy and be reading it. You can hold it soon.
Yes, and while Clash are an American publisher, they have been sorting out all their distribution in the UK as well. So as well as being on Amazon and stuff, it is available for order through Waterstones and things, which again, they've kind of been really good about that, because they were aware that, I'm obviously a British author, so it just being available in the States probably wasn't ideal. So yeah, it is available in ordinary places, which is nice.
It's lovely. So I have a follow-up question, which has nothing to do with the story or the collection, but it may well come back. But if you could ask a question of a writing hero, who would you pick and what would you ask?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Do you know what? Really bizarrely, lately, in terms of writing heroes, I've been thinking about someone who I haven't thought about in about 20 odd years, but I was massively into when I was a teenager, which is William Burroughs. I was a massive William Burroughs fan when I was like about 17, 18. I'm not sure I fully understood it at the time. But just I don't know, just everything, his life, his work, his entire existence seemed in some way to be a work of art to me, which I still to this day find kind of fascinating, people who are like that. So I think it would be him, but what I would ask him, I don't know, possibly what the hell he meant by half of the stuff that he wrote in Naked Lunch, or if he just doesn't know either. Because I love it. I mean, Naked Lunch is still one of my favourite books, but I wouldn't claim to be able to tell you exactly why. I'd want to know his process, I think, is what I want to know. I'd want to know if he was more like in the true spirit of the Beat Generation, if he was like Kerouac and just kind of like vomited out manuscripts and they just as they were, or if he did go back and kind of edit things or try to give them any kind of coherence, or if they were just like a mad fever dream. Because they read that's what kind of fascinates me about him, is they do read like a mad fever dream in the way that like a David Lynch film feels like a mad fever dream. But at the same time, you're aware, with like a Lynch film, that it's also very, very carefully crafted to feel like that. It's not like he's just putting random nonsense that occurs to him up on the screen. He's actually achieving quite complex effects. And I feel that at the times as well with Burroughs when he's at his best. It's like, I mean, maybe he was just that much of a genius that he could just create these books that felt like really intricate and coherent in their own kind of weird way. But yeah, I'd be really intrigued to know kind of how he achieved that and what his process was. Mainly so I could copy it, obviously.
Yeah. Do you think you would want it to be just a stroke of genius? Like, if the answer was to
I don't know.
ways, or would you prefer that he was just a man, and that he also struggled with it. And
in all honesty, I don't know even if I were able to ask him if he would even give me a straight answer, to be honest, because he tended to speak in kind of half riddles and things a lot of the time anyway. So I'm not sure if you'd even get a straight answer. You might just come away more confused. But maybe that would be the fun of it. Maybe that would be the experience.
I like to imagine even the greats would do that thing we've all done, where someone says, "Oh, and when you wrote this thing, did you mean that?" Even even Tolkien would go, "Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, that was on purpose."
Like I often notice these things like after I finish stories, or sometimes even when if I'm doing like a reading or something, I'll just suddenly notice something. I'll be like, oh, I was doing that, was I? But I think that's good. I mean, I think that's entirely healthy. I remember for quite a while I was working as a kind of a book reviewer, kind of from when I left university for about 10 years or so for various kind of websites and magazines and things. And I was aware, having talked to authors and done author interviews as well, that quite often you would pull things out as kind of like, themes or topics in their work and stuff. And they'd be like, oh, okay, if you say so. So I've never thought of that. But yeah, if that's what you get from it, great. So I kind of feel like, when it goes beyond your reach, it does kind of take on a life of its own sometimes.
Yeah.
Just love the ballsy approach of saying, yeah, of course, yes, definitely, no trouble at all.
I am brilliant, yes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've realised this. Do one of the questions that I was keen to ask you on this second time you're appearing. By the way, great to have you on again. Do you have recommendations for key collections or anthologies? Because I've read a lot of novels, but not necessarily a lot of collections. And I wondered whether there are any that just really stick out for you. That people should read.
My kind of go. I mean, what my go-tos are always Robert Aikman. So probably of his, probably Cold Hand in Mine is probably the one that I love most. Just over and over again for this kind of like weird, subtle, not even exactly horror. It's just kind of unsettling, strange stories. Him and Shirley Jackson are the two that did it best. So her collection that has The Lottery in it's also excellent. But I think I prefer the Aikman. I think because it has a real Britishness about it that obviously I connect with a lot more closely, I think. And a real kind of suburban Britishness as well, which is kind of fascinating me at the moment. The way the suburbs are so weird and unsettling just by their very nature. Even when nothing's happening, the suburbs are just odd. So I do have a bit of fascination with that. So I always go back to Robert Aikman every time. Apart from that, I mean, in all honesty, I don't revisit a lot. I think I'm someone who's constantly seeking the next thing. So I don't always go back and reread anything. I'm trying to think if there are any others apart from Aikman that I always dip back into. I mean, if going back to kind of older stories, I always look at Arthur Machen's stories as well. I think influence a lot of this kind of modern, kind of weird and supernatural fiction in really interesting ways. And I don't think he's talked about enough. Everyone always kind of talks about I don't know who actually really, like M.R. James and things in terms of kind of like the British tradition of ghost stories and things. I think Machen is deeply weirder and leans more towards folk horror as well. So that's probably again kind of showing my own personal interest. But I think Machen's short stories, so the White People and other stories, is absolutely worth visiting if you want to do something older and not read M.R. James.
Have you ever been shocked by how good something is outside of your own sort of not comfort zone, but outside of the genres that you normally read?
Yeah, I mean, constantly. I do try and read around, and I mean, there's one story that I always refer back to, which is by Wells Tower, if you encounter the wonderfully named Wells Tower, and it is the title story of his collection, Everything Ravaged, Everything Burned. And one of the reasons I always talk about it is because it's an amazing story, and I absolutely love it, and it is one that I've read multiple times, partly because I can't work out how he does what he does in it. And normally I can. I'll look at something and I say, oh, well, they've done this really clever thing. Like, oh, maybe I'll use that sometime. This, I'm like, he's done a really clever thing, but I can't actually work out how it works. So for people who haven't read it, in a very, very, very broad idea of what it's about, it's a story that it's basically about the Vikings, like raping and pillaging. but it's told entirely in a modern voice and a modern idiom.
Oh.
But somehow it works. And it shouldn't work. Whenever I've tried to reproduce it, it's just rubbish. And yet when he does it, it's amazing. And I've had this conversation with other people as well, and they've been like, "Oh my God, yes, that story. How does he do that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've literally looked at it, trying to like dissect it, like word by word, and I still can't work out how what he's done is different to what myself and other people have done, and yet it's better." So that in particular, that whole collection is actually really good. But that story in particular, Everything Ravaged, Everything Burned, I just think is astonishing, and will be of interest to people who are fans of kind of genre work and things as well. Because again, I mean, this is what I was saying earlier, is I think a lot of literary fiction, it's just fiction that's marketed as literary fiction. A lot of it is actually firmly within one genre or another.
I think I agree with you. Like the amount of like magical realism that people get away with in literary.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just a fantasy book. Fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, so many are, and sci-fi nowadays as well, because you're getting a lot of kind of near future, kind of post-apocalyptic, or
what ifs. Yeah,
yeah, and a lot of that in the literary world. But it's not fooling anyone. We all know what it is.
it's good. It's enjoyable. You should just enjoy the things that you're reading.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned it may have been before we were on mic, but you mentioned that you've got 7 books coming out this year.
Yes.
That you've worked on. I mean, not that you've written all of them, but you've worked on a lot.
Yes.
I was just wondering whether you were interested, whether you can talk about any of them, or
yeah. So I mean, most of them have been announced. So altogether, I can say so. It's there's 2 collections of short stories, including this one, 1 novella. There's 2 fiction anthologies, 2 non-fiction anthologies, and then there is also a chapbook, which is a single short story and a chapbook. But like I said, not everything's been announced yet. So up to date we have, so obviously this book that's coming out. The second collection of short stories I can't talk about at the moment because we haven't got an exact delivery date for it. But the idea is that it's my slightly less genre stuff. It still has a lot of kind of magical realism stuff and things like that in, but it's a less hardcore genre than a folk horror collection. It's a bit more mainstream than that. I do have the novella is coming out with Black Shuck Books in May, and that's called Where He Once Stood, and it's a very odd story that's almost unmarketable. So I'm really glad that Stephen Black Shuck took it. It's completely the wrong length in that it's 50,000 words, which is too long to be a novella and too short to be a novel. It's a really, really weird length, and it opens like a crime book, and then the middle section is like a portal fantasy, and then it ends up being like satanic horror. So it's quite a really weird one. But yeah, it's all about basically a boy that goes missing, and then he's missing for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then he's like, well, I can't remember how old he is. I think he's supposed to be like 8 or 9 when he goes missing. Then, like 5 weeks later, this 20-year-old young man turns up on the doorstep claiming to be him.
That's very unsettling.
And what you do with that.
Yeah.
And then it goes other places from there. But that was kind of like the initial setup on that one. And then so 2 fiction anthologies. So both have now been announced actually, because one's just been announced by the Ink. So one is Unearthed, which is coming from Titan Books, which I co-edited with Philip Fracassi, and that's all stories of archaeological horror. So kind of like ancient evil buried under kind of old ruins. Covers lots of very famous old ruins as well, like Stonehenge and Machu Picchu and other places. And then I have Unhallowed Gifts coming from Dead Ink Books, which is a follow-up to the anthology Unquiet Guests that I did with them, which came out last year. And it's going to be like a deluxe hardback with sprayed edges and all that kind of business. But Unquiet Guests was Haunted House stories. This one is Cursed Objects stories. And I'm very excited for it. It's got a lovely cover, and I'm very excited with the lineup we've got for it as well. So I think that's going to be really good. What else we got? Non-fiction anthologies. We've got another writing book for Dead Ink, which is on writing creative non-fiction, which is in the same series as Writing the Uncanny and Writing the Future and Writing the Magic that we've done before. And then I've got a book coming out with Luna Press, which I co-edited with Peter Sutton. that is called Collective, which is a book of essays by anthology editors about how we do what we do, how you put together an anthology, and looking at all the different aspects of that and the different types of anthology. And we've got like Ellen Datlow and Mark Morris, Paul Kane and Maria Regan, Steve Shaw from Black Shark Books, all talking about kind of what people do. Anne Vandermeer as well, which I'm really excited about.
That sounds fascinating. That one, obviously, it all sounds great, but that's what a really interesting angle to take.
Well, we get asked that so much. This is the whole thing. This is where it came from. It's like it's the number one thing we get asked at kind of conventions and things. Is like, how do you put together an anthology? And it was like, there is no book of it. There's nothing on how to do that. And we thought we could do a how-to, but I always feel it's more interesting just to get lots of different perspectives rather than just like one straightforward paint by numbers version. So yeah, we've done that. We've got lots of different perspectives. There's 2 interviews. So Steve Shaw and Ellen Datlow have done interviews, and then the others are all essays by anthology editors about some aspect of what they do. And it goes right into like quite granular stuff. So there is one there by Neil Williamson on how to do kind of writing group anthologies. So, quite small independent press stuff. Right up to kind of Anne Vandermeer talking about her kind of process and how that works and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And as always with these things, I find it interesting in that I learn stuff as well as I work on it. So it's good in both ways. I get to be a published editor again at the end of it, but I also get to learn along the way.
I've got a follow-up question.
Oh, yeah,
when
go on.
you sleep, how do you manage this many projects without going absolutely bonkers?
I mean, partly this time round, it is just a weird convergence because, I mean, like they've all been taking different amounts of time. Like the Unearthed one with Titan Books that I did with Philip, that's been going on for, I think by the time it comes out, it will have been over 2 years. That's taken from when we first talked about it to probably about 2.5 years, actually, from when we first talked about it to when it gets published. So, that's been a long, slow burn. Whereas some of them have happened a lot quicker, especially smaller independent presses. Everything moves a bit faster than the bigger presses. The Dead Ink anthology and Hello Gifts, that's going to be about 9 months, I think, from when we signed contract to when it comes out. So markedly quicker, and they've just all come together at the same time. So I've got nothing next year. 2027 is really quiet for me.
Wide open.
I'm just going to be sitting with my feet up,
You should
enjoying the sunshine.
Because you've doomed yourself now to a very busy year.
I keep saying this as well. I'm really, really rubbish at this. I always say I'm just going to get this thing done, and then I'm going to take a break. And I've been saying that for about the last 10 years.
We've spoken about a lot of projects here, and it's fantastic to know that you've got all these things coming out. But I think people should probably be directed towards where they can follow for updates on this, just to make sure, because they're going to struggle to hold all of that in their heads. So where are the best places to catch that from you?
So I do have a website, which is www.dancoxon.com. So nice and easy to find. I don't put a lot of stuff on there, so that's fairly sparse, but I will put like all the major new releases and stuff on there. You can also sign up to a newsletter via that, which is roughly once a month or once every 2 months, depending on how busy I am. So definitely once a month this year. So that's also good to sign up to if you're interested. Or Instagram is the main other place to find me, as I think I'm dan.coxon.author on there. Which is very easy to find, and I'm constantly posting stuff on there, as well as pictures of bread that I've baked, and occasionally Warhammer miniatures. Bread, Warhammer miniatures, and books, essentially.
And gigs.
Do you like those things?
I've noticed that because I've been following you for a while, actually. And gigs, there's lots of good.
Yeah, I can't resist taking photos of gigs. So again, I was a music journalist very briefly,
right?
But I was only working for like quite small publications. They often made me take my own photos. So I used to actually have a half decent camera that I could take photos for. So I still can't resist. If I've got a photo that I think is half good, I think, I've got to put it somewhere. It's got to go somewhere.
I like it. Well, fantastic. I mean, so I think we've done the showcase here. We've heard a fantastic story. We've spoken about all the fantastic things you've got coming out, and people know where to find you. But just one last time for the cheap seats, just tell us a bit about Come Sing for the Harrowing, would you?
Yeah, so it's a collection of short stories. I think there's 18 in total now. That basically are looking at folk horror, but from kind of different angles. So it's just kind of mixing it up and looking at kind of weird fiction mixed with folk horror, contemporary folk horror. There's an urban folk horror story. There's one kind of more cosmic horror. There's kind of haunted objects and a few other bits and pieces thrown in. But that's essentially it. And it's quite a weird book. I know people have already kind of been saying that it is kind of like slow burn, low key horror. It's not in your face horror. So if you're not a person who loves grim and gory horror, then you'll probably be fine with this. It's more about kind of traditional storytelling, I guess, but in a weird way. I think most of the stories are quite surprising, if that's a good thing.
Yeah, not gonna lie, that actually sounds like it's extremely up my street. I find that overblown horror does lose me a little bit because it sort of reminds me that I'm not in the story if it's so overblown.
Yeah.
Whereas like creeping dread and unsettling things happening around me, that'll linger with me for weeks. That's a great.
I have this particular thing I like when I read other people, and I think it's what I try to achieve in what I do, which is that having that moment where your protagonist suddenly realizes that they've kind of misunderstood or underestimated the world, and that actually things are weirder and darker and moving in ways that they've never quite comprehended before. And I like that. It's quite a specific thing, but I like that. And I actually think in part it's because it kind of harks back to when we were children, that when we're kids, everything is weird. We don't understand the way the world works. So everything, when we discover it for the first time, is weird and unusual and mind-blowing. And I think it makes us feel like that again. That actually the world is a stranger and more exciting place, even if it is more dangerous than we thought it was.
That's a great philosophy.
I think it's a fantastic philosophy. I think, and we'll also, I think, potentially leave it there. We'll end on that. Come Sing for the Harrowing is out today, so grab it, folks. And Dan, I very much hope that we get to tell some stories with you again in the future. So please do come back on whenever you want.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy being here again.
Wonderful.
And lovely having you. Just before we go, Ben, my tummy's making a buzzing noise.
That would be my wasp cock that did that to you. Sorry about that.
It's those loads again.
It's those loads. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?